Hello everyone, my name is Chris and welcome to my all dragon shout locations within Skyrim. There are 27 shouts within Skyrim, including the DLCs, 20 in the base game, 3 in the DAWNGUARD DLC and 4 in the Dragonborn DLC. Each shout is made up of 3 words of power, with each word making the shout more powerful. This guide will aim to show you what all words of power are and explain what each shout does in the game. For most words of power, they almost always appear at the end of dungeons or at dragon lairs. Some of the words are located within dungeons that are home to named dragon priests. If you wish to know how to gather all dragon priest masks, then I have a guide on that which you can watch here. As always, there are timestamps in the description if you wish to skip to a particular shout location, but without further ado, let's get into the video. First up is Animal Allegiance. Animal Allegiance, once used, will call the aid of animals to the player to aid them in combat. This shout can be particularly useful when fighting giants, as you can turn their mammoths against them. Additionally, for players that like hunting, this shout is an easy way to gather animal resources without having to chase them across the map. The first word of power can be found at Unrelenting. Head into the dungeon where you can help Madresi Dran in clearing the dungeon.
Wealth, but my cowardly workforce ran at the first sign of danger. I'll tell you what, you help me get the treasure, and I'll split it with you. Deal?
Simply make your way to the very end of the dungeon where the word wall can be found. The second word of power can be found at Ancient's Ascent. Head to the location where you will need to fight a dragon guard in the word wall. After the dragon is dead, the word wall will have the second word of power. The final word of power can be found within Ysgramor's tomb. You will not be able to access this area or the word wall until you progress through the companion's questline. Once you have reforged Wulfrad, you will then be able to access the dungeon. Simply head to the end of the dungeon and outside where the word of power can be found on top. Next up is Aura Whisper. Aura Whisper, once used, will highlight all NPCs and functions very similarly to Detect Life Alteration spell. However, unlike the spell, the shout will also reveal the locations of animunculi, undead, daedras and dragons. The first word can be found at Northwind Summit. Simply head to the location and fight the dragon guard in the word wall. Once the dragon is dead, you can find the word on the word wall. The second word of power can be found at Volfum Dungeon. Head to the location where you will start the quest to eliminate Hevnorak with Voldar. Upon gathering certain items within the dungeon for the quest, you will come across the word wall. The final word can be found at Volumrud. Enter the dungeon and gather the 2 ceremonial weapons needed to open the Elder's Cairn door. Fight the Draugr boss and upstairs will be the word of power. Next up is Become Ethereal. Become Ethereal, once used, will make the player invulnerable for a short time. Additionally, the player will be able to sprint unlimitedly when using this shout. If the player attacks a target or casts a spell, then the shout effect will end immediately. When the ability is activated, the player can even jump down mountains, as the shout negates all fall damage. This shout is very useful when needing to either escape a battle, heal, or even charge up master spells to use against a target without the risk of being injured when casting. The first word can be found inside Ironbine Barrow. Make your way to the location where you will meet Selma and Beam Jar, who will then help you fight through the dungeon. Make your way to the end of the dungeon and kill Warlord Gathric. After Gathric is dead, you will find the word of power. The second word can be found at Lost Valley Redoubt. Make your way to the location and fight your way to the top of the area. Once at the top, you will find 2 Hagravens performing a ritual that creates a Forsworn Briarheart.
Rise from death. Blood of our blood.
Behind them will be the word wall. The final word of power can be found at Ustengrav. Make your way through the dungeon until you come to the small Whirlwind Sprint puzzle. Just before that, on the left hand side, down at the bottom of the dungeon, will be the word wall. Next up is Call Dragon. Call Dragon, once used, will call the dragon Odoving to the player to aid them in combat for a short time. All words of power are learned at the same time during the main story quest, The Fallen. This shout is needed to progress through the main storyline.
I must have misheard you. I thought you asked me to help you trap a dragon in my palace.
Interesting problem. Yes. I've been poring over the records here in Skyhaven Temple.
Ah, indeed. I'm no master of the voice, but it is written here in this scroll.
Odahviing, winged snow hunter, as I read it. Then came the flash of light, just on the horizon, within the clouds that marked the border. It could have been lightning, but there was no thunder.
Next up is Call of Valor. Call of Valor, once used, will summon one of the 3 ancient heroes in the Hall of Valor who helped fight against Alduin. All words of power are learned at the same time during the final story quest Sovngarde. After the player has destroyed Alduin, the player will receive the shout as a gift.
Return now to Nirn, with this rich boon from shore, my lord. A shout to bring a hero from Sovngarde in your hour of need.
All hail the Dragonborn! Hail him with great praise!
Next up is Clear Skies. Clear Skies, once used, will remove the wind barrier that separates High Hrothgar with the throat of the world. Additionally, once used, the shout will remove all weather effects such as rain or snow and can even be used to negate Alduin's meteor shout. If the shout is used at night, the sky will clear, revealing an aurora. All words of power are learned at the same time during the main story quest, The Throat of the World. When needing to talk to Paarthurnax, Arngeir will provide you with all words of power to open the path needed to take to the top of the mountain.
I will grant you my understanding of clear skies. This is your final gift from us, Dragonborn. Use it well.
Next up is Disarm. Disarm, once used at full power, will disarm NPCs up to level 30. The shout is also able to disarm multiple people at once, and if you manage to pick up the weapons after disarming them, they will become very easy to defeat. The first word of power can be found at Elder's Blood Peak. Simply head to the location and fight the dragon god in the word wall. Once the dragon has been killed, you can retrieve the first word. The second word of power can be found at Silverdrift Lair. Head into the dungeon and make your way to the end. Depending on your level, the word wall will be guarded by a Draugr Death Overlord or a Dragon Priest. Once defeated, you will find the word of power. The final word of power can be found at Snowvale Sanctum. You won't be able to retrieve this word of power until you've progressed through the Thieves Guild questline and have reached the quest Speaking with Silence. Head through the dungeon where you will find the third word of power. Next up is Dismay. Dismay, once used, will cause enemies to flee away from battle. Even at full power, if your character is proficient in illusion, you can cast more powerful versions of fear which overpower the shout, making it redundant. However, for those that are not playing a magic build, this is an easy way to gain access to illusion magic without needing to level it up. The first word of power can be found at Dead Crone Rock. Make your way through the area until you get to the very top, where a Hagraven will be guarding the word wall. Once the Hagraven is defeated, you can acquire the first word. The second word can be found at Lost Tongue Overlook. Simply defeat the dragon god in the word wall. Once defeated, you can acquire the second word of power. The final word can be found within Shalador's Maze at Labyrinthian. Make your way to Labyrinthian and from the Bronjuna Sanctuary, head east and enter Shalador's Maze. You will not need to traverse through the maze, but instead simply walk around the maze to access the word wall. Next up is Dragonrend. Once used, Dragonrend will force the dragon to land and stop them from flying for a short duration, allowing you to deal a lot more damage to a dragon within a short period of time. All words of power are learned at the same time during the main story questline Alduin's Bane when using the Elder Scroll. This shout is needed to progress through the main storyline, and Dragonrend can only be used on dragons. Next up is Elemental Fury. Elemental Fury, once used, will increase the player's melee attack speed. At full power, the shout will double the player's attack speed, however the shout does not affect unarmed, crossbow or bound weapons. Please note that the shout will only work on weapons that have no enchantment, as the shout applies an enchantment to the weapon. The first word of power can be found at Dragontooth Crater. Simply kill the dragon guard in the word wall. Once the dragon has been killed, you can acquire the first word of power. The second word of power can be found within Shriekwind Bastion. Simply fight your way through the ruins until you get to the Overlook. Within the ruins will be the second word. The final word can be found at the statue to Meridia. Make your way to the statue and just a little ways from the stairs will be the final word of power. Next up is Fire Breath. Fire Breath, once used, will cause 90 points of fire damage when used at its full strength to any enemies within its path. The shout will also stagger enemies upon a hit from the shout. Fire Breath is also particularly good against enemies already susceptible to fire damage, such as the undead, as well as certain dragons such as frost dragons. The first word of power can be found at Dustman's Cairn. You won't be able to acquire this word until you've progressed through the companion's questline until you've reached the quest Proving Honour. Simply fight your way to the end of the dungeon where you will find the first word. The second word can be found within Sunderstone Gorge. Fight your way through the area until you get to the end. Be careful as there are a lot of mages within this location. Once at the end of the location, on the right hand side will be the word. The final word of power can be found at the Throat of the World during the quest of the same name. Once you meet Parthenax, he will give you the final word of Fire Breath upon meeting him.
The first meeting of two of the Dove. By long tradition, the Elder speaks first. Hear my Thum. Feel it in your bones. Match it if you are Dovahkiin. I have spoken. The Rotmulag waits. A gift, Dovahkiin. You'll understand fire as the Dove do.
Next up is Frost Breath. Very similar to Fire Breath, Frost Breath will deal 90 points of frost damage when used at its full strength to any enemies within its path. The shout will also slow and stagger enemies upon a hit. Frost Breath is also particularly good against enemies already susceptible to frost damage such as Fire Atronachs as well as certain fire breathing dragons. The first word of power can be found at Bonestrewn Crest. Simply head to the location and fight the dragon guard in the word wall. Once the dragon has been defeated, simply head to the word wall to acquire the word. The second word can be found within Volgunfer. Simply fight your way to the end where you will need to defeat Mikro Golderson. Once he is defeated, the word can be found within the next room behind where Mikro spawned. The final word of power can be found at Skyborn Altar. Simply head to the location and fight the dragon guard in the word wall. Once the dragon has been defeated, simply head to the word wall to acquire the final word. Next up is Ice Form. Ice Form, once used, will encase an NPC in ice, immobilizing them for 20 to 30 seconds. Additionally, while the target is immobile, they will be dealt a small amount of frost damage per second. Please note that if you attack an NPC that is immobilized, they will simply break from the ice and get back up. The first word can be found at Frostmere Crypt. This location is also where the player can obtain the Pale Blade from the Pale Lady. Make your way through the crypt and into Frostmere Depths. Before continuing towards the Pale Blade Holder, head down the stairs and on the left hand side will be the word wall. The second word can be found at Mount Anfor. Simply head to the location and fight the dragon guard in the word wall. Once the dragon has been defeated, simply head to the word wall to acquire the word. The final word can be found at Sarfall. You won't be able to acquire this word of power until you progress through the College of Withold questline until you've reached the quest under Sarfall. Make your way through the dungeon until you find the Eye of Magnus. Once the boss battle has been fought, take the door behind the Eye of Magnus towards the exit where you will find the final word of power. Next up is Kyne's Peace. Kyne's Peace, once used, will calm all animals for the exception of frost trolls. Animals will no longer react to attacks for a limited time. Additionally, much like Aura's Whisper or the Detect Life spell, the shout will show all animals in blue for a short duration. The first word can be found within Ragnvold. To access the word, you will need to open the sarcophagus of the Dragon Priest Otar the Mad. Acquire both skull keys and defeat Otar to open the barrier blocking off the word wall. Once opened, you will be able to access the word. The second word can be found within Durnehviir's Fast. Enter the dungeon and make your way through the area until you come across the word wall with a large chest in front of it. Make sure you avoid the trapdoor next to the chest, otherwise you will have to fight your way back to the word wall. The final word of power can be found within Shroud Half Barrow. Simply fight your way to the barrow and then through a lot of Draugr. At the end of the dungeon will be the word wall. Next up is Marked for Death. Marked for Death, once used, will weaken an enemy's armor rating permanently and deal damage for 60 seconds. At full power, the shout will decrease an NPC's armor rating by 75 as well as dealing 3 points of damage for 60 seconds. The first word can be found within the Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary. You won't be able to acquire this word until you join the Dark Brotherhood during the quest with friends like these. Once you have joined, enter the Sanctuary and make your way down to the main room with the waterfall. In the corner will be the word wall. The second word can be found at Autumn Watchtower. Simply head to the location and fight the dragon guard in the word wall. Once the dragon has been defeated, head towards the left hand tower and head up the stairs. Once at the top, you can access the word wall on the ledge. The final word can be found within Forsaken Cave. Simply fight your way through the dungeon until you get to the end where the word wall can be found above the boss sarcophagus. Next up is Slow Time. Slow Time, once used, will slow everything down significantly, and although it does affect the player, they will still be able to move much faster than their NPC counterparts. At full power, the shout will slow time down by 90% for 16 seconds. The first word can be found within Hag's End. Fight your way through until you get to the end of the location with a Hagraven guarding the word wall. Once she is dead, you can acquire the word. The second word of power can be found within Corvinjund. You won't be able to acquire this word until you progress through Skyrim's Civil War questline and have progressed enough to receive the quest The Jagged Crown. Once the quest is active, fight your way through the dungeon until you find the Jagged Crown. Behind the throne will be the word wall. The final word of power can be found within Labyrinthian. You won't be able to acquire this word until you progress through the College of Windhold questline and have reached the quest The Staff of Magnus. Make your way all the way through to the dungeon until you get to the Tribune where the Dragon Priest Meroke lies. Halfway between the entrance and Meroke will be the word wall. Next up is Stormcall. Stormcall, once used, will summon a downpour and a thunderstorm above the player. The lightning from the thunderstorm will strike down and target anyone in the area. At full power, the shout will summon the storm for 3 minutes with the bolts of lightning and deal 80 points of damage. The first word can be found at Forholst. Make your way through the dungeon where you will need to defeat the Dragon Priest Ragot. Exit the dungeon where you will be on the stone walls. Circle around where the word wall will be located. The second word can be found within the Highgate Ruins. Fight your way through the room where you will need to defeat the Dragon Priest Vokun. Once he is dead, head through the right hand door into another room where the word wall is located. The final word can be found within the Skuldafn Temple. You won't be able to access this location until you start the main storyline quest, the World Eater Zeri. Please note that if you leave Skuldafn without acquiring this word, then it will become inaccessible. Make your way through the temple and just beyond the Dragon Claw door will be the word wall. Next up is Throw Voice. Throw Voice, once used, will throw the Dragonborn's voice towards a point the player dictates. Any enemies within the area will investigate and distract themselves by searching in circles before becoming passive again. All 3 words of power can be found at shear points. Once you're within the area, you will need to fight both a dragon as well as the named Dragon Priest Crosis. Once they are defeated, simply head to the word wall where all 3 words of power are given. Next up is Unrelenting Force. Unrelenting Force, once used at full power, will throw the target back and ragdoll them before they get back up. The first word can be found within Bleak Falls Barrow. Simply fight your way through the dungeon and at the end will be the word of power. The second word is given during the main story questline The Way of the Voice. Once you enter High Hrothgar, the Greybeards will give you the second word of power.
Ro, the second word in Unrelenting Force. Ro means balance in the dragon tongue. Combine it with Fus, force, to focus your thumb more sharply. Ro. You learn a new word like a master.
The third word of power can be given once the player completes the quest The Horn of Jurgen Windcaller. Upon retrieving the horn and returning it to Arngeir, the Greybeards will give you the final word of power.
With me, it is time for us to recognize you formally as Dragonborn. You are ready to learn the final word of Unrelenting Force, Da, which means push. With all three words together, this shout is much more powerful. Use it wisely. Master Wulfgar will now gift you with his knowledge of Da.
Next up is Whirlwind Sprint. Whirlwind Sprint, once used, will allow the player to quickly dash forward, propelling them further the more words they have learned. The first word can be given to you at High Hrothgar. You will need to progress through the main storyline until you get to the quest The Way of the Voice. Once you're at High Hrothgar and have received the second word of Unrelenting Force, the Greybeards will give you the first word.
You must hear the word within yourself before you can project it into a thum.
The second word can be found within Volskik. You do not even need to go through the location. Once at the entrance, you can simply scale the mountainside to reach the top, where the Dragon Priest Volsung will resurrect. Once he has been defeated, you can acquire the second word of power. The final word of power can be found within Dead Men's Respite. Fight your way through the dungeon until you get to the end room with Draugr sitting in seats. Behind them all will be the word of power. That's all the dragon shouts and their words of power within the base game. Now let's move on to the DLC shouts. Let's begin with the DAWNGUARD DLC. First up is Drain Vitality. Drain Vitality, once used, can deal stamina, magicka and health damage to a target. At full power, the shout deals 5 points of health, stamina and magicka damage to a target for 30 seconds. The first word can be found at Arcwind Point. Simply make your way to the location and after fighting some undead, climb the stairs where the word wall can be found. The second word can be found within Dim Hollow Crypt. Fight your way through the dungeon until you rescue Serana. Once you have her, continue through the dungeon towards the exit until you get to a large room with stairs on all sides. On the right hand side from the exit across the room will be the word wall. The final word of power can be found within the Forgotten Vale. You won't be able to access this area until you've started the DAWNGUARD quest Touching the Sky. To find this word, start at the Way Shrine of Learning. From here, head southwest across the river and up the icy path until you get to a frozen lake. Make your way to the middle of the lake where two twin dragons will emerge from the lake. After they are defeated, continue towards the rock in the middle of the lake where the word is written upon the rock. Next up is Summon Durnehviir. Summon Durnehviir, once used, will summon the dragon Durnehviir from the Soul Cairn to help you fight in combat for a limited time. You won't be able to acquire this shout until you start the quest Beyond Death. After defeating Durnehviir and acquiring the Elder Scroll from Valerica, Durnehviir will ask the player to summon him in Tamriel by calling his name. Similar to Call Dragon, you will gain all three words of power from this shout upon talking with Durnehviir.
I will place my name with you and grant you the right to call my name from Tamriel. Do me this simple honor, and I will fight at your side as your Graze Mazen, your ally, and teach you my Thum. Simply speak my name to the heavens when you feel the time is right.
The last shout in the DAWNGUARD DLC is Solteir. Solteir, once used, will deal 300 points of damage to whatever it hits. Additionally, if the player has an adequately sized empty soul gem and the shout kills the target, it will fill the soul gem. And lastly, the shout will resurrect the NPC it killed to fight for the player for 60 seconds. You won't be able to acquire this shout until you have the Summon Durnehviir shout talked about previously. To acquire all three words of power, you simply need to summon Durnehviir 3 times. With each summon, Durnehviir will teach the player one word of Solteir each time.
The free air of Fus at long last. As promised, I now teach you the first word of soul tearing. Re, the essence of your enemy's life force. from that prison. Hear now the second word of soul tearing. Vaz, meaning to tear your enemy's soul from its living vessel. You have kept your side of the bargain. Now let me fulfill mine. Feel the last word of soul tearing within yourself. Zol. The unlife that results when a soul is imprisoned in dead flesh.
That's all the Dawnguard shouts, now let's move on to the Dragonborn shouts. First up is Battle Fury. Battle Fury, once used, is a copy of Elemental Fury, however it affects the player's followers' attack speed instead of their own. At full power, the shout will increase the follower's attack speed for 3 minutes. Please note that the shout will only work on followers' weapons that have no enchantment, as the shout applies an enchantment to the weapon. All 3 words of power can be found within Valor the Jailer's tomb within the quest Lost Legacy. You won't be able to receive this quest until you've completed the quest A New Source of Stalrim from the Skull Village. You will also need to progress through the main Dragonborn storyline questline and bring Freya back to Skull Village after fighting through the Temple of Mirak.
I heard from Dior how you went in search of Baldur. That was very brave. And in fact, that's just the kind of courage I'm looking for. An old tomb, I think. It must have been opened by an earthquake that accompanied one of the Red Mountain's eruptions.
The first 2 words of power can be found at the end of 2 separate paths needed to take to find 2 halves of an Amethyst Dragonclaw. The final word can be found at the end of the dungeon after fighting and defeating Valor. Next up is Bend Will. Bend Will, once used, allows the player to bring animals and people under their control. At full power, the player can bring dragons under their control and ride them into combat. The first word can be found at Searing's Watch during the main storyline quest, The Fate of the Skull. Make your way to the location where the first word can be found at the top of the area.
You must go to Searing's Watch. Learn there the word that Mirak learned long ago, and use that knowledge on the Windstone.
The second word is given to you by Hermaeus Mora after reading and making your way to the end of the Epistolary Acumen Black Book.
Champion, your journey towards enlightenment has finally led you here to my realm, as I knew it would. I know what you want. To use your power as Dragonborn, to bend the world to your will. Here then is the knowledge you need, although you did not know you needed it. The second word of power. Use it to bend the wills of mortals to your purpose.
The final word is also given to you by Hermaeus Mora, who tasks you in retrieving the secrets of the skull. Once Storm reads the book, Hermaeus will kill him and give you the final word of power.
The skull yield up their secrets to me. Dragonborn, you have delivered me the gift I requested. In return, I'll keep my promise, as befits a Prince of Oblivion. I give you the word of power that you need to challenge Mirak.
Next up is Cyclone. Cyclone, once used, will produce a small cyclone which when comes into contact with an NPC will function similarly to Unrelenting Force but will throw the targets upwards instead. The first word can be found within Ben Congarake. Simply fight your way through until you get to the end of the dungeon. Behind the locked gate will be the word wall. The second word can be found within White Ridge Barrow. Simply fight your way through to the end of the dungeon where you will need to defeat the dragon priest Kyne. After he is defeated, you can acquire the second word of power. The final word can be found within Colbjorn Barrow. You won't be able to retrieve this word until you have progressed through the quest Unearthed, where you have excavated enough of the barrow to find the word wall. Once you have excavated enough of it, the word can be found within the large room with scaffolding at its centre. The final shout is Dragon Aspect. The Dragon Aspect, once used, will envelop the player in a set of ethereal dragon armor. Additionally, the shout massively increases attack damage as well as armor rating. The shout will increase the player's fire and frost resistance, make shouts more powerful, and also decreases the shout recharge time. The shout is considered a power and as such can only be used once a day, however the effects of this shout last for 5 minutes. The first word can be found within the Temple of Miraak. You won't be able to acquire this word until you progress through the main Dragonborn story and have started the quest, the Temple of Miraak. Head down into the temple and through to the temple sanctum. Continue through where you will come to a dead end with the word wall and several coffins. The second word can be found within Bloodskull Barrow, however you will need to enter via the Raven Rock mine. Make your way down and through the mine and past the Bloodskull Blade puzzle until you come across the dragon priest Zakrisos. Defeat him and at the end of the room will be the word. The final word of power can be found within Apocrypha. You won't be able to acquire this word until you start the final storyline quest at the summit of Apocrypha. Make your way through the Waking Dreams Black Book until you reach chapter 6. Before riding Sarotar, you will find the final word at the very end of the platform that Sarotar will use to land. And there we have all shouts within Skyrim. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, thank you for watching.